you all for coming. I feel like we should just introduce ourselves. There's so few of us.
Right.
My name is Dale Boren, and I'm a retired Casperite. I've agreed to be the moderator tonight. I wanted to thank Jim Brown from the League of Women Voters for assisting. This is a library event, and the Adult Services Manager, Betsy O'Neill, is here to represent the library. Thank you very much for doing this. What we're going to do is, once everyone is seated, we're going to ask one question of everyone, and everyone will have a chance to answer the same question. And let me find the question here. The question will be, talk about the legislative activities that you were involved with that you think matter most to your constituents. So that's the opening 2-minute question. With us tonight, we have on the far left of the stage, Jamie Lean, who is from House District 38, so that's West Casper?
Yes, Paradise Valley, Robertson Road.
She's on the Judiciary Committee and the Gaming Committee. She's the Select Committee, and she's the chair of that committee. Next we have Art Washut, who is from District 36. That is
Northeast Casper.
Northeast Casper, okay. And he's the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. Next is Julie Jarvis in House District 57, which is South Central Casper, okay. And she's on the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee, and also the Air Transportation Liaison Committee. Is that an interim committee?
It is.
Okay.
It's a select. This is now one of the standing committees.
And then Alyssa Campbell, House District 56, also on Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, and Air Transportation Liaison Committee. And then Bill Landon, who is announced this was his last session. I gotta take a deep breath for this. Bill is on the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, he's the chair. He's on Corporations, Election, and Political Subdivisions, the Air Transportation Liaison Committee, the Select Committee on School Facilities, he's the chair of that committee, and the Select Committee on Legislative Facilities, Technology, and Process. So with that, I will tell you the question again, and then why don't we just go down the line,
Okay.
and I'll be glad to repeat this question as often as necessary, but talk about the legislative activities that you were involved with that you think matter most to your constituents. Senator Bill Landon.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for all of you coming this evening. It's always enjoyable for me to visit with some of our constituents, and appreciate you taking time out of your schedules. This past session, there are a couple of things I would point toward that I am actually proud of and feel like I did represent Natrona County, which is something that I've always taken a lot of pride in. Every single vote I take, I try to think of all of you back here at home and maybe sitting in a room together, and how would we want this issue to go? I've always done that for these 20 years that I've been in the Wyoming Senate. One of the most important things I did, I thought, in the last interim was to serve on the Corporations Committee. And one of the things that was brought to that committee was this idea of election integrity. The problem is, I didn't really think that we had an election integrity problem. And so I worked very, very hard to try to modify some of that legislation and ultimately to get rid of it. I thought the Secretary of State's office was out of bounds on many of those things. I'm a local control guy, and I've always campaigned on that. When I came out to visit with you about going down to the Wyoming Senate, I've always said, I believe in local control. And that's one of the pillars of the Republican platforms, by the way, number 14 if you read it. So I really struggled with why we were going after our county clerks and why we were shutting down polling places. Really what that was voter suppression. And so some of the great work that we did in the Wyoming Senate this year was to get rid of some of those bills. So that's number one. Second of all, the last 3 or 4 years, real quickly, I have tried to pay attention to mental health and substance abuse issues. I think it's bigger than we have allowed it to be on the policy front. I hope legislators going forward will pay more attention to it. I have brought 3 or 4 bills in the last 3 years. This year I brought a bill to regulate a substance called kratom. I didn't even know what it was 6 months ago. Kratom is a very dangerous substance that is over the counter and is being sold to teenagers. As of July 1st, we will have that regulated to 21 years old. And I owe a lot of thanks to those up here on the panel tonight for supporting that piece of legislation. We've got work to do on the substance abuse front and on the mental health front. And finally,
15 seconds.
15 seconds? Well, that's probably good enough. You're gonna hear from lots of them. Thank you very much.
Oh, you were wanting to do 3 minutes?
Oh, so you
Okay, well,
That was 3.
It was? Okay.
You're good.
Excellent,
No,
thank
that's
you.
good.
Sorry to have to interrupt you.
I forgot what I was gonna say anyway, so. Yeah, thanks, Dan.
It's a good thing.
Representative Campbell, please talk about the legislative activities that you were involved with that you think matter most to your constituents.
Matter most. Okay. I'm gonna start with this most recent budget session. Because as we started to go through on the House side, it doesn't apply to the Senate side because they did things a little smarter than we did. But there were a number of things as we worked through the budget that had been removed, well, cut from the governor's recommendation. And so as the House, we went through line by line all of those things. And then we heard from a lot of residents throughout the state when they learned about cuts to the University of Wyoming or to Wyoming Public Media or Wyoming Public Radio or I don't remember some of the other services that we provide. I mean, you know, local municipalities provide services in terms of our youth or disabled or adult populations. And so the number of people that reached out to us and then we fought for it on the floor and said this is important. So a couple of the amendments I was very happy and honored to run. Restored funding to Wyoming Public Radio and Wyoming Public Media, and then also the University of Wyoming. So just those things were really important to me and I think really important to our residents. The other thing I would go back to, I think our general session moving forward, the legislation that I've been a part of has been constituent led. So the very first bill that I was able to run through and actually became law came from the town of Opal, which most people don't even know. We have a town, Opal? Yes, we do. And then a couple from students and from, you know, high school students in Cody. And so being able to actually have constituents reach out and say, hey, this is a problem, this needs work, and then being able to sponsor that and run it through, I think is the most important work we can do. So I was really happy to do that.
All right, thank you.
So halfway through, I'll hold up the yellow, and then at the time, we'll do the red.
You don't have to fill it if you've already said what you
You know, if Harshman were here, he doesn't pay attention to
He
that.
does not.
I don't think so.
He does not.
I think that's why I was asked to be here.
Yeah, to be the heavy, huh?
Representative Jarvis, would you like to hear the question again?
You know what, I think
you're good.
I think I'm
Okay.
okay so far. Some of the things that were particularly important to House District 57 that they reported, because I ran a survey because like Senator Landon talked about something that is core is, I believe, that in the grassroots and the local people and really trying to represent that voice. And so part of that was that putting out a constituent survey and really just asking the constituents, what do you want, what do you believe in, what do you think? And then guiding my votes with the majority of the people within my district. Some things that came back, wildlife was extremely important. So the corner crossing and really representing the hunter side of the community in my district. The election was also, the election integrity was a big one, and I ran a bill this year, that House Bill 80, and it was my first bill that made it all the way through. And what it really did was address the issue of when last session, when we made it so that Medicaid and Medicare cards can no longer be used to register to vote. One of the problems that also existed was that people that were living in nursing homes and assisted living facilities would have to still go down and register and renew their licenses at the DMV. And so what I did is I ran a bill that extended it to the full 16 years so it matched the federal law, and it allowed people to renew their IDs via mail with a certified signature, and so that they would not lose their right to vote, nor to be able to use a real ID in any circumstance that they may need.
Representative Washington.
Hey, so the bill I want to talk about is one that has one of those really great titles, that
We all voted against.
you love, it was called the Second Amendment Preservation Act. And, if you're a candidate in Wyoming and you rise up and speak against a bill with a title like the Second Amendment Preservation Act, get ready for some email. And so the reason I want to talk about that is because it obviously is important. The Second Amendment is one of those topics around Wyoming that will generate a lot of concern from constituents. So this bill comes along and all 23 of our sheriffs and most of our police chiefs signed a letter of concern about that legislation. And, given my many years in law enforcement, I know that sheriffs are type A, independent kinds of people. And getting all 23 of them to agree when to go to lunch can be a real challenge. And so when all 23 of those sheriffs tell me that they have concerns with that legislation, I paid attention. And I've always been pretty strong on the Second Amendment. I voted for lots of good Second Amendment legislation. But this was a bridge too far. This was really a bill that was potentially anti-law enforcement as opposed to pro-Second Amendment. And so I went to the microphone many times and spoke against this legislation and advocated that the body reject this legislation. Ultimately, it passed the House, despite all 23 sheriffs saying they thought it was problematic legislation. It passed the Senate, and the governor vetoed it, and then on a veto override, the Senate did not override that veto, so it did not become law. And so why would 23 sheriffs oppose a bill like the Second Amendment Preservation Act when they face more voters than I do, and all of us do? And there's only one answer, that's public safety. That they were more concerned about the potential impact of that bill on public safety in their communities. And that's why they opposed that bill. And so I was proud to stand up and oppose it, and I'll take my lumps wherever they come. But it was a piece of legislation that was ambiguous, lots of differing opinions about what it did, what it didn't do. We can do better. If we're gonna pass legislation, we need to have good solid legislation that doesn't put our law enforcement people in the crosshairs.
That's 2 minutes and 59 seconds.
Wow.
Ding!
Really good. Representative Lee.
Thank you, and thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for having me. I'm Jamie Lean, House District 38, and most of my district is rural, so I do have the very western edge of Casper. In addition to sitting on Judiciary and the Select Gaming Committee, I also sit on Management, Audit, and Revenue. Some important things that came out of Revenue this year were that we allowed the Department of Revenue to have electronic filings. They're opt-in, so if you want to deal with the electronic filings via the Department of Revenue to pay your taxes, you can. We also did the removal of the sunset date for the long-term homeowners to make sure that that goes on in perpetuity and doesn't sunset this year, so that our retirees have a better chance to stay in their homes as they use their fixed incomes. And then we combined the sales and use tax, chapters 15 and 16, into one chapter and repealed an entire chapter out of our green books, out of our law books, to make it more user-friendly for the taxpayer. And then a budget amendment that I did run that I was happy to support was that one piece of that amendment was to give the retirees a 13th check. While it did not make it all the way through the budget process, your appropriations is taking it up in the interim. So those were a few things from Revenue. In Judiciary, we passed House Bill 8 and House Bill 9, which makes stalking of a minor a felony and protects our children through the grooming process before a child is actually harmed sexually. Now you can be charged if you are soliciting that child for sexual favors. My personal bill that I carried was House Bill 102. It has to do with your very personal property rights through AI protections. And if somebody takes your photo or your grandkid's photo or your spouse's photo and turns it into an illicit video or photograph without your consent, you have recourse for that. In the gaming, it was a very successful gaming session. We brought 4 pieces of legislation and all of them survived. One of them is the definitions changes, amendments that were made so the district attorneys had a very, it took some ambiguity out of the law and gave them a clear path to be able to prosecute illegal gambling in Wyoming. The skills games, we made it so you have to put up a barrier in the grocery stores or place them within the liquor store footprint so that they're not just in the open for families coming and going from the grocery stores. We passed an anti-money laundering bill, which is important for all businesses and not just the gaming committee. And then we gave local control to municipalities. And so the county commissioners were the ones that were only able to permit the historic horse racing machines or mini casinos that you're seeing around town, and now your city council has that ability as well. And so those were some of the things that I helped with this session, and it was a lot, but it was good. It was good to work for the people. So thank you for coming tonight.
Okay, thank you all very much.
So for the questions from the audience, is it 2 minutes? What is your,
It's up to you.
up to me? Okay, well, we'll start with 2 minutes. So this is a question from the audience, and it doesn't say who it's to, so if you'd like to answer it, please do. If not, that's okay, we'll move on.
Dale, can they hear us in the back without the microphones? I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. Many state legislatures and many counties have electronic voting in chambers. What are the pluses and minuses of such a system, and would Wyoming legislature ever adopt such a system?
Can you repeat the
Many
first part?
state legislatures and many counties have electronic voting in chambers.
We do.
What are the pluses and minuses of such a system, and would the Wyoming legislature ever adopt such a system? Representative Washek.
So I think we're talking about there, the electronic billboards on the wall of the body, so that when we vote by push button, the green light comes on if we vote yes, and the red light comes on if we vote no. City council, I think, uses that here in the city of Casper. I'm not a big fan of that approach. I think there's something unique about casting your eyes and nose, especially on third reading, final passage of a bill, to simply touch a little button and under your desk seems rather impersonal. And I think as an elected official, I want to be heard. And when I vote aye or no on a bill, I want to say it. I don't want to just press the green button. I do think that it might be advantageous when we're doing really time-consuming, roll call votes on, like, votes of introduction during a budget session where you have to have a 2/3 majority. That can become really time-consuming. We spend a lot of time in a 20-day session, voting whether to introduce a bill or not. But especially on third reading, final passage, I don't think we ought to have electronic voting there. People can watch at home on their computers and see our votes as they come in. We do have that capability, and you'll see basically in the electronic voting. But also, when you look at the historic chamber, all the work we did to restore that Capitol, to suddenly stick up a big electronic billboard on the side of the building, I think would be horrible, you know? We had TVs up there during COVID, and I thought it really diminished the history and tradition of the house.
Yeah, just real quickly, I think the representative did a great job of representing some of the conversations we've had on the legislative process front. We have one of the few citizen legislatures left. And I agree with everything that Art just said. I think I like the way we operate now, and I think it's very transparent. We've heard from other states that have the big billboards that there's a lot of gamesmanship can be brought in with that electronic board, for example, too. So I think we're in a pretty good spot. I think we brought a lot of electronic and real-time exposure to the legislature. Everyone has an opportunity to see us live just about any time we're doing work. So I think we're in a pretty good spot.
Any others?
Okay, we have been joined by, thank you, we have been joined by Senator Jim Anderson, Senate District 28, welcome.
Thank you.
Senator Anderson is on the Minerals, Business and Economic Development, he's the chair of that committee, and also Transportation, Highways and Military Affairs. The others were given a chance to answer this question, 3 minutes to say, to talk about the legislative activities that you were involved in that you think matter most to your constituents.
3 minutes, huh? That's
You don't have to take it.
not gonna take long to talk about that. The budget, of course, was the biggest segment we were involved in that really mattered to the constituents. And of course, all that budget is about people. Everything in there is about people, whether it's the health department or the schools or what it is, it's all about people. And every one of those issues was, some people would be hurt if we cut their budget. One group proposed that we cut $40 million out of the University of Wyoming budget, out of their block grant, and $20 million out of their another request. That did not go through. We funded the University of Wyoming in whole. In fact, we added $6 million to their budget. So they came out with 66 million instead of 60. So those are the kind of things that make a big difference to the constituents, is if the healthcare, which healthcare includes all the senior centers, everything you can think of in healthcare. That's the matching funds for Medicaid, Medicare, all those things. And those are huge importance. I had the dollar amount for health department for this biennium is $2,591,153,000, and that's the biggest one on the agenda for the budget. But if you add schools, K through 12 is $2.2 billion, but if you add in the University of Wyoming at $455 million and the community colleges at $290 million, that comes to about $2,926,000. So they're actually just a little bit more spent on education than it was on health if you add all education in. Usually all you hear about is K through 12, and that is a big budget, no doubt about that, as it should be. We got a lot of kids, we got a lot of teachers, we got a lot a lot of activities in that area, and it should be big. Now, that does not include the buildings and those kind of things that we're responsible for. There's a separate budget for that. So those are the big things that's important to the constituents is how are we spending the tax dollars? And everybody says, you know, the taxpayers, well, the taxpayers are all the minerals groups, and that's one of my committees. The minerals groups pay all your taxes. So you're not paying any sales tax, or you're not paying any income tax and that kind of things to the state. You do pay local taxes when you pay your I can't read what that says. That says, go ahead,
It
Jim.
says-
Is that what that says? Go ahead. So anyway, your local taxes all get spent right here with your property taxes. And the state money comes from minerals and big time. Coal, oil and gas.
About 70% of it.
Yeah, 70%. We also got 30% of our budget this year from the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. That was a wonderful thing that we're actually getting a lot of money from our investments that we made over the last, 40 years?
25 years. Yeah.
25 years.
I could listen to you talk all night long.
Oh, well,
But
that's
in
what
fairness,
that's what they
3 minutes are up.
It says we give all of our time.
He never had been fared up, so.
Well, leading to the next question, I should say, you know, the questions are supposed to come from you all. If you have any questions, there's no question that's off the table in this forum, so you could talk about the People's Tax Initiative, you could talk about abortion, you could ask questions about firefighter funding or rural health or education or anything you would like, and now's your chance. You know, you've been very gracious to come here and sit for this, so please do. Does anybody need a pen and paper? Jim Brown back there will have it.
I would just like to thank you for supporting PBS.
No kidding.
Yes, oh, thank you.
Panicking, it's gonna go away.
I was too.
I know.
If I can just, a quick comment, especially on the Wyoming Public Media, on the radio side. I think when the cuts were made, there wasn't a clear understanding of the services. So our Wyoming Public Radio, Public Media, about 50,000 residents, that's what they listen to get their local news and the weather and local events. I mean, 50,000. And it's also what carries our emergency alert system. So when there's a tornado, a fire, a flash flood somewhere, it is that alert system that travels throughout the state, and our firefighters rely on it, our emergency response teams rely on it, all of our residents rely on it. So when we started talking about this is what public radio is in Wyoming, and it matters to a lot of people. Yeah,
You
it
know,
does.
just to add to what the representative's talking about, something that really impressed me was how many legitimate, personally written messages I got from constituents on that issue, on public media. And it was from the heart, and I had a lot of my constituents write direct. You know, we get a lot of cookie cutter emails. About every day we had 300 or 400 emails during the legislative session. A lot of those come in the form of, you get the same one 100 times, and somebody just changes their name on it. The public media ones were from individuals, and individually written, and that mattered. That made a big, big difference to me, and I know it did to some of my friends in the Senate. It was pretty overwhelming, really, how much people wanted us to save that operation, so.
Anyone else on that? That's one of the questions that we have is on constituent communications, and, you know, does it matter? How do you perceive it? How do you take it? How do you respond to it? You send 300 or 400 emails a day. How do you handle constituent communication? Does it matter?
Can I jump on that one first?
Yes.
Thank you. It matters. It matters a great deal. And what I really appreciate, so I prioritize, cause it is 300 or 400, probably on a light day. So at the end of the day, I would just go through and the ones that I know are from Casper in the subject line. I mean, if they say, you know, Casper resident or Natrona County resident, or I'm a House District 56 constituent, something, that's my priority. So we'll read those and respond to those first, and then I go out of the county, so it's any constituent, any resident in Wyoming, and then we get the ones from Pennsylvania and Vermont and New Mexico, and, because they're very loud when it comes to issues in Wyoming. But it is, so, you know, prioritizing that way. So when residents let us know who they are, that makes it easier. And then the cookie cutter ones, we get a lot of them, where it's some grassroots organization, you sign your name and your email, and then they blast everybody, and we get so many that they're supposed to be customized template, like insert representative's name here, and insert your county here, and and people don't, they just send them to us. So those are the ones I don't respond to, and I ignore. But what I would say in terms of communication, people usually wait until we're on the floor to start talking to us. Talk to us now. I mean, start building those relationships throughout the year. Have coffee with us, you know, talk to us, so that when we're on the session, I mean, we've already got that relationship, and it makes it easy. Don't wait until February 3rd to reach out and communicate, because then we do have a lot that we're trying to wade through.
Absolutely true, and things move so fast in the legislature that, you know, I think we're used to seeing bills take 4 or 5 years to work their way through Congress. And so then when you get a bill come to the Wyoming legislature and it's in the House and out again in 7 days, that when we get emails from people or text messages from people, it's very common that they're asking us about a bill that's already gone, right? Please vote for House Bill 55 or whatever. And House Bill 55 passed the House last week and has already gone to the Senate.
The Senate's already killing that.
The Senate's already killing it. They have a propensity of doing that. So that's an important thing. And also, you know, like this year's schedule was incredible. One night we worked till 1:30 in the morning in the House, and then we adjourned or recessed when we went home. Judiciary Committee that Representative Lean and I serve on met the next morning at 8 a.m. We had 3 bills that nobody had read because we worked till 1:30 in the morning. And so we shortchanged those folks who had those bills before us. We worked till midnight that night, and then we worked a 12-hour day on Saturday. And so you figure out those days, and you got 400 emails on each of those days, that's 1,200 emails I had no chance to read. So, you know, this is my staff. You don't have a staff in the Wyoming legislature. It's you and your cell phone and your email. So, please show a little, we do want to hear from you. I think hearing it from you early is better than trying to do it during the session. But, it's really an impossibility. These groups that just bomb you with emails, just sorting through your email to find out which ones might have come from your constituents can take more time than you have. And that's what a republic is. You have representatives, not a direct democracy. So we do the best we can with the facts we have.
So texting in the middle of the night is okay.
That's when we're coming home.
Kidding.
Yep, I would
Specifically,
have it all the time.
I would say that the quickest response was the text messages, and I did appreciate those folks that felt the haste. And sometimes I would field a call, they'd leave a message, or they would send a text after they called and said, I just called you, this is what I was calling about. And those were the easiest ones to know how they were responding, and they may have said, I emailed you 3 days ago, but because of the time constraints, I'm 3 days behind in email. And so I echo what they have said about having those conversations now, because it does help to know upfront what your constituents are thinking moving into the session. And this is a government by the people and for the people, and that's how we make the votes, and we know what to do is because the people tell us.
does it help if, I'll just ask on behalf of everyone, does it help if someone says I live in your district?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, like, what's really nice is people will put at the bottom, like, their actual address. And you can, because we know who's in our district, you can kind of cross-verify and see that that really truly is someone from your district. So it is nice when somebody will put their name and then they just throw their address right there at the bottom. It's very helpful to know, because they're just we get flooded, and there's a lot of where it just comes out as mass mailers. And then they repeat the same one, the same that comes through over and over and over. And so it's trying to sift through those to find the ones, if you take the time to write, like, I think we all make a concerted effort to take the time to respond.
You know,
It's
something that I
personalized.
think is kind of important for folks back home to know too, we do rely on each other, and there are experts among us on transportation and military type issues. I have no hesitation going to Senator Anderson and asking him a question or finding out, you know, more about a topic. We are not as cohesive as we used to be in the Natrona County delegation. We used to be able to rely on each other a lot more, and it's been a little bit splintered, to be honest. That has been a little disheartening to me these last 3 or 4 years. But I hope going forward that can be fixed, and our Natrona County delegation is important, and they're important to each other. And so when you go to the voting palace in August, I hope you'll remember that part of being a good legislator is sending somebody down there who can get along with other legislators. If you can't do that, you're not going to be a very effective legislator. So I just wanted to throw that out. I think that's really important on the communication front.
Anyone else?
You're not giving them the red.
They haven't gotten there yet.
Wyoming's legislature rejected making EMS essential services, which impacts keeping these services available. Is there a plan to assist rural EMS response? And is there a plan to fund fire services in the county, especially the fire and services provided to the rural east side of Casper, Coal Creek, and like that?
Can I take that one? I was gonna say, I'll take that one.
Representative Campbell.
Yes, thank you. So, met with our Natrona County Fire Protection District just before this last session, and we really talked through and worked through, the challenges they're having with revenue. As any of our special districts, all of the special districts in Wyoming are funded through mill levies, which are directly tied to property taxes. So when you reduce property taxes and mill levies, we're reducing the revenue they have to work with. So, brought a bill rather quickly. It didn't make it through the session, and which is okay. So I'm working on it during the interim, and we'll have legislation. And what we're talking about right now is possibly, I think our best bet is going to be to take giving our counties the authority to combine the fire protection district and the emergency medical, and combine them into one emergency services district that then is overseen by one board and would combine both mill levies. So we would have the 3 mill levies from the fire protection district plus the 4 from the emergency medical services, giving them 7. Probably have 5 of those that are approved through county commissioners, then the 2 additional that would be approved by voters. But just combining those 2 then gives counties the flexibility, because most of our fire protection districts already offer the services that are under EMS, but they're not reimbursed for those and have no revenue for those. So at least by combining those, they would have the revenue to continue providing those services. And if they didn't, they just had a fire protection district, then by having the authority to combine them, they could generate some additional revenue to actually provide the emergency medical services. So that's what I'm working on right now in the interim, and we'll have legislation that moves that forward in general.
Related to that, I know 2 of you are on the revenue committees. You're not, Well, I know that the
People that
interim
want that.
studies that have to do with property taxes and, you know, cleaning up and understanding what the property tax, the legislation that's already passed and, how that's gonna work. Do you have anything to add to that, how we're gonna pay for those services with the property tax that's approved?
There's a push to look at true reform. There was a bill that made it all the way through the Senate, and on the third reading, it died by one vote, and that would have taken 20 property mills and put the onus on the state to pay for education, but left our special districts and municipality budgets intact. So that's one avenue of reform that the Revenue Committee will look at in the interim to be able to maintain our special districts and municipality budgets. And then in the Minerals Committee on Monday, I went and saw the Minerals Committee, and since Representative Campbell is taking this approach with the mill levies, I've taken the approach of helping ask for an amendment on the impact and in the Industrial Siding Act, so that our impact of payment assistance can come up front instead of during the project, and that would have helped pay for our fire trucks. And so we would have avoided a $2 million deficit in our county fire budget. So multiple people working on multiple pieces of the puzzle, and that will help us to give our county fire the best chance at success.
You know, I think, one of the, go ahead.
I have just one follow-up question. You said true reform, and I don't could you just give us another sentence or two on what that means, what you mean by that?
Yes, thank you. So when we're talking about property tax exemptions, sometimes they're not all created equal. And our tax code says we're supposed to be fair and equal. And so when you talk about a 4% cap, that applies to all the properties. And we've created these exemptions along the way, which the legislature has the authority to do. But the long-term homeowners only applies to those 65 and older and paid property taxes for 25 years. The 25% property tax cut this year applied to owner-occupied if you applied for it and signed an attestation that you live in your home 8 months of the year or less, creating more or less Band-Aid effects. Quick reductions without the long-term study of what's going on in the budgets for all municipalities, the state, education funding along the way. And so when we talk about true reform, we're talking about looking at what has been done in the past, what is working, what is not working, and then taking the good and getting rid of the bad and filling in the gaps.
Okay. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Dale. I served on the Revenue Committee years ago, and kind of disagree with the notion that Wyoming needs reform on its taxation, property taxation. So that's for future legislators to work that out, but Wyoming pays the least amount of tax of anybody in the country. I'm a little concerned about the property tax front, and especially for our special districts out there. They're the ones getting hurt the worst. It was fine for us to try to give some relief to homeowners paying the property taxes, and all of us agreed. I think all of us up here voted for these reductions in tax. But when you do that, you reduce services. And so I get very worried about this upcoming election in November, when we've got an initiative on the ballot that would cut property tax by 50%. I'm not sure that we could get arms around that. I think it would be very, very difficult on special districts out across, very difficult on local governments. And so that worries me for future legislators and for all of us, really. So the property tax front, I hope we're careful. It's kind of a rallying cry. You hear it quite a bit. It pops up in some headlines, you know, that we're gonna reform property tax. We've been voted many, many times during my 20 years as the best run state in the country. And so I just am saying to all of you, I hope we're careful. I hope we're careful with this. Just one more thing about the fire districts. I really appreciated Representative Campbell bringing the bill that she did. If we lose a fire district, for example, think what that does to your homeowner's insurance, if you can even get it. So, you know, adequately funding our fire district is gonna be really important, so, thank you.
Anything else? Legislators frequently consult or rely upon lobbyists for information when crafting bills. Some have criticized legislators for relying too much on input from the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC. Is this criticism justified?
I don't know what else.
I don't know what else is either.
So apparently we don't rely on them.
Senator Anderson.
Dale, I think where the problem comes in is when Alec writes a bill for you and you just bring it to the floor and you don't know much about it, you don't know what it means, you don't know what it is. Now, as far as lobbyists, yeah, they're great. And it is good to get the information from them, but you don't take a bill that they write and just take it to the floor and try to send it through the legislature.
Well, some
Those
do.
are written for nationwide. They're not written for Wyoming. They're written for everybody in the nation. And Alec does it, everybody does that. It isn't anything different than any other organization to do for you. But you've gotta be a legislator and you've gotta put your own thinking to it. And you've gotta put the Wyoming slant on it, not Washington DC slant. And we get a lot of those, by the way, a lot of those that people just bring from Washington DC or wherever their lobbyists come from. What? No
Means
way.
halfway.
Halfway. You have another minute.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Washington.
You know, I've utilized Alec's resources quite a bit. There's three big groups, Council State Government, ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, and the National NCSL.
NCSL, yeah.
Anyway, ALEC is probably the more conservative of those three groups. But I found their information is very helpful, very reliable. I don't know if anybody actually has ALEC draft a bill for them. You know, ALEC can give you some good information, but I always work with our legislative service office to actually craft the legislation. I don't demand that they, you know, cookie cutter the ALEC template, you know, if there isn't such a thing. So I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that we besmirched ALEC. I think ALEC has, like a lot of these think tanks, has a lot of resources, a lot of experts, and they can give you some pretty helpful stuff.
I was gonna say, more to the lobbyist, I rely heavily on the lobbyists that are there that represent various industries and, cause they represent members, the boots on the ground, the people that know. So typically, if someone comes to me, you know, with a problem, what I do is take that to our legislative services. We have about 40 attorneys on staff. So, and explain the intent, right? Here's the problem, here's the intent, and then leave it to our legal staff to actually draft legislation. But then I take it back to the industries and the lobbyists and the municipalities and whoever the legislation is going to affect. I take the draft that we have crafted back to them and say, okay, would you read through this? Does it actually do what we intended to do? What are the unintended consequences? What are some things that maybe we need to adjust that might do more harm than good, and get their feedback. But yeah, definitely work through our legislative service and all of those folks, because not only do they have the legal background, they have the expertise, they understand the statutes and how we make everything cohesive in language, and we make sure we don't violate our Wyoming Constitution, and which is where some of those problems happen when you bring an out-of-state bill through. Odds pretty good it's gonna be unconstitutional, because it works in other states, but it doesn't hold up in Wyoming. So really rely on our staff, but put a lot of faith and value in the expertise our lobbyists bring.
Representative Jarvis.
And when I first came in, the narrative and the rhetoric that you hear is that lobbyists are there for a purpose to sway you into one specific way. But I have to tell you, there are several lobbyists in Wyoming that have been phenomenal about, and like, I've been pretty blunt on the, tell me your story and tell me the why, but then I wanna know why, what the other side would say. And they're actually really honest and good about it. They don't love telling you that, cause they'll be like, well, you know, it's gonna be this, but, as small as our state is, we rely on a lot of trust and integrity. And you get the, like, if a lobbyist doesn't tell you the truth and you get up and you present information for which you thought was true and you find out it's not, you don't ever go back and talk to that lobbyist again. So it's just pretty much done. You find out very quickly who you can, and so they're also very careful about giving you the right information. So when she talks about bringing it back, like, it's taking it back to what would the medical society say about this? Like, how do they feel about this? What are the impacts? Because a lot of the work that we do, the concern, and I guess a lot of the concern that I have just because of the industry for which I work in all the time, are those unintended consequences. Where something looked like a really good idea and we didn't realize the impact that it would really have on the people that now have to inherit that law and that change. And so having those people to run it back through on the, do you see any issues with this? Is this what, you're hoping for and intending? And having those conversations are fundamental.
Your
our
industry is,
Education, sorry.
So,
Representative Lane, were you? Okay. Totally,
I don't have anything to add.
just a
Senator
final
Landon.
thought for everybody. During my time, one of the biggest changes that I've seen is that we do have a lot of bills that are coming from somewhere else. And they're being filed, by folks. And, as Senator Anderson pointed out, a lot of times it's a square peg that we're trying to jam into a round hole here in Wyoming. That's been a little frustrating to me. I think it bogs us down a lot. We have increased our numbers almost every year, the past 5, 6, 8 years. We've increased how many bills are put in the hopper. We waste a lot of time on bills that are created elsewhere, and then we just stamp a name on them and throw them out on the floor. That's been hard. I don't think that's good legislating, and that's been a big change. So that was a great question, because I think good legislators here in Wyoming do work with our information people, because it is a citizen legislature. The third leg of the stool is literally those information people that you rely on. We don't have a staff. But as Representative Jarman pointed out, if they don't give us the straight, then they're not gonna last in the lobby pool very long. I rely on the information people, and I really don't even call them lobbyists. Most of the time, they're just being helpful. And the first question I always ask is, who's gonna throw rocks at this? Who's on the other side? So, thank you for the question.
That question on lobbyists, there are not very many lobbyists that will not tell you the truth on both sides of the issue.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they don't last long. The lobbyists don't let them stay. We don't let them stay. But not very many does that happen to, but I can count them on one hand since I've been in 14 years, that actually you start ignoring.
Yeah.
Good to know. Next question, this is not intended for anyone in particular, but with regards to law enforcement, what strategies and ideas would you offer to the city, county peace officers that would allow them to be proactive with issues like youth violence, graffiti, and homeless-related crimes? Would you like
Art
to
trouble.
I throw everything law enforcement.
Chief, you better take that.
Proactive law enforcement, is all about prevention, because we don't have any law enforcement authority until after the fact. So there's no power, there's no ability to force people to do anything, right? Where if a crime's been committed, you can put the habeas corpus on them and take them to jail. But when you're talking about being proactive, you're talking about building those relationships, looking for those deficits that are contributing to some of these problems. And when we look at our community services, the one area that always strikes me is that when we're looking at juveniles, people talk about gaps in the system, right? That, well, there's a gap for this or a gap for that, or we don't have funding for this, or we don't have a program for that. And it just seems like, to me, that we ought to have some ability to fund kind of an overarching tool, maybe within the juvenile courts, where if you have an issue that comes before a juvenile court judge and there are no resources available to deal with that particular issue, that the judge can access this specific fund, right? And it won't be large because it's not intended to deal with everything, but it's intended to deal with those deficits, those gaps that sometimes are identified. They say, well, DFS can handle that. DFS goes, that's not our statutory authority. We can't deal with that. Or, you know, the city of Casper can deal with that. The city of Casper is not our bailiwick, right? And so when you have those deficits, you may not even know that they're there until they pop up. And then if the juvenile court had the resources to deal with it on that single basis, then it has helped us identify where those gaps are so that we can maybe look at other alternative funding in the future. Not specific to law enforcement, but related to the juvenile court.
Representative Jarvis.
I think a big component of that, and something that Senator hit on right at the very beginning, was the mental health piece. And the preventative side of really addressing that mental health, because a lot of friends and family that are in law enforcement that talk about like being in the jails with people who can't get evaluated because of mental health issues. And so, or they're frequent flyers because they can't get the assistance and support with something with another agency because that agency is overwhelmed, or that just kind of like what he talked about, that not my deal, not my deal. I think we have to start addressing things that are truly issues that are occurring inside of our systems and organizations, because we are failing. If they're overwhelmed in certain situations, they can't do the work that they're supposed to, or we don't have we're allowing other things to slip through the cracks. And so I would agree. And just personally, why did I go into education? Because I truly, with the core of who I am, believe that a literate society is a contributing society. That my whole goal in life is, if I can create literate human beings at any point in time in their lives, they can change the outcome and the trajectory of the direction for which they're headed. And if they're not, it becomes really, really difficult. So.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. I'm gonna take a 30,000 foot, and just in terms of being proactive, and what that means. I actually had our chief, reached out to Chief Cheney about an unrelated issue, topic that I'm working on during the interim. And when we wrapped up that conversation, he said, here, you know, can I have just a few more minutes? And I said, absolutely. So it was more in the domestic violence realm, and some serious challenges with current statute. And so he's walking me through. So here are the cases that we're working, and here's what's happening, and here's we can't charge because of this statute and these, you know, carve outs. And I had no idea that was even there. So we walked through, I mean, page by page, and he identified for me, here are the statutes that prevent us from doing our job and prevent us from keeping victims safe. So I have like a page and a half now of various legislation that I'll be working on. That's what proactive means to me, is because I'm not in the field. I don't know these things. I don't know the challenges that our officers are running into until they come to me and say, here's what needs to be changed so we can do our job and keep our public safe. So lots of conversations just in terms of youth and family and, how do we maybe hold parents accountable for some of these things? That requires statutory change. So that's what proactive means, is you come to us and say, here's the problem, help me fix it. And then, we get it done, hopefully.
Thank you. Senator Anderson.
I think the proactive one is the officers actually presenting to the schools and before they become little criminals, when they're in their youth. I think we got a lot more impact on them when an officer walks in and puts on a presentation, whether that's to the schools or the Boys and Girls Club, anywhere they can get an audience of the children. I think that's where we start, and we head that off, that they become little juveniles at the teen ages. And I think I've seen that be very effective in some schools in Wyoming.
We're about halfway through the program, so if you have additional questions, we'll have time for about 6 more, I think. I'm going to paraphrase this one a little bit, and I think this is for everyone. There's been an abortion bill every year, even in the budget sessions, and they end up in court. Would you be willing to put the issue on the ballot? And if not, why not?
I'd be willing to put it on the ballot, and the reason we don't get it put on the ballot is because the abortion guys know how the public's gonna vote. They already know how they're gonna vote. But I'd sure like to see it on the ballot. We're not a democracy, but if everybody wants to know what everybody thinks, that's one way of doing it. And it's not gonna settle anything because the answer's gonna be wrong for the people that want something done. And by the way, all of our abortion issues have not gone to the courts. We have an abortion bill every year. Every year we have one. Just the last 2 or 3 years, they've all gone to the courts because they've been too restrictive and too punitive on the people and the doctors. So that isn't true that they all go to the courts, but they sure have the last 2 or 3 years.
Let's go right down the road. So, I appreciate the question because I think, whoever asked the question is right. Every year we have a handful of these. And I have a confession to make to everyone in here tonight. That's a vote that I took home with me. I drove home with it. I was not happy with my vote. Born and raised a Roman Catholic, and the Catholic Church, we all know where they stand on that issue. Pro-life, and they talk about it every homily, every Sunday. And so I voted that way. But I did not live up to my oath to the Constitution doing it. I knew when I cast that vote in the Wyoming Senate this year that vote violated the Constitution. And I believe that the Supreme Court of Wyoming will find that again, and will strike it down. Whoever that judge, or the entire panel of Supreme Court judges are, they will be impugned as activist judges, when in fact it's the legislature not doing its job. We did not pass a constitutional bill. It belongs as a vote to the people. Senator Anderson is absolutely right. There's a reason why it's never going to do that. It's because a faction of the legislature is not going to allow that, because we know where people are going to land on the issue of abortion. It runs about 70 to 72%. If there's a reasonable level that we want pro-life, people will be okay with that. If it's unreasonable, they'll vote it down. So that's where I'm at, and we do bring votes home with us. There's votes over my 20 years that I've wondered to this day, did I go the right way on those?
Thank you, Senator Landon. Melissa Campbell.
Yeah, we're just gonna go down the road. So a couple of thoughts. That's one of the interesting things about Wyoming, because we are a very, very red state, and we are a very conservative state, and we are a very Republican state, and we are a very, government does not get government out of my personal life. So while we have, which is interesting, I think that the most recent poll, and I don't know when it was, but it was about, 64% of Wyoming said that is not a decision the government should make. And then it was 2018, when we did have a constitutional amendment that says every individual has the right to make their own healthcare decision. Well, that is why every piece of legislation that has come through after that is now unconstitutional, because we changed the Constitution. So it's gonna run into problems every single time. And the only way you can you can truly address abortion is to just a flat out ban, no exceptions. It is banned in its entirety, and that won't ever fly in Wyoming, because the exceptions matter to people. Well, what if the mother's life is in danger? Well, what if it is a rape? What if it's incest? What if it's, I actually had a student of mine, when I was at Roosevelt, 14-year-old, 21-year-old cousin. How do you handle that situation? And so that's where most of us in Wyoming fall. An absolute ban doesn't sit well in those situations. And that's the only way you will ever have a clear, decisive answer, and that's not gonna fly in Wyoming.
So just to clarify, you would be for putting it on the ballot?
Absolutely, and it's not gonna,
Thank you,
running a
Representative.
resolution it's not gonna happen.
Representative Jarvis.
So this is a funny one for me, because this was one of the questions that I asked on my survey, and I was told that my district was very staunch conservative before I ever sent out the survey. And so the survey question was, our state should, and then first is be pro-life with no exceptions, be pro-choice, be pro-life with exceptions, not be involved in abortion decisions, so no government, or they had the right to say no response. Pro-life with exception, or with no exceptions was 14% of my district.
Yeah.
The pro-choice was 25%, pro-life with exceptions was 32%, and government should not be as involved was 29%. So it was pretty split on that. It did pose an interesting, because he says there are votes that we take that we don't love, because I am also Catholic, and so, when I took that oath on which, like, where do you sit, and I've cried many, many nights over some of the votes in different ways. But there is also that component of the constitutionality, and then if I'm truly representing the people. Do I believe it should go, back to the people? And that we should stop trying to, because it's gonna, every single time we do this, it's gonna come back, and because it's such a big topic, we are just costing the state when we do this. If we don't put it back to the people, and we continue to try to run these bills and word it in an artful way that just goes against the Constitution, we're gonna be back here every single time.
Thank you, Representative Jarvis. Representative Washington.
Yeah, I need more than 3 minutes.
No, you don't, because I think we get it. We know where your heart is.
It's a huge issue, very important, and I stand with one principle, and that is it's never the baby's fault. Never the baby's fault. And the baby pays the price. And that's why I vote pro-life in the legislature. It's not the baby's fault. So when I look at our Constitution, I say, well, it's unconstitutional. I say, well, what part of the Constitution are you relying on? Look at Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. You use very unique language there. The language refers to all members of the human race have a right to life. That's in our Constitution. And it's the only place that we use that language, the right, or the human race. Every place else in the Article 1, where we talk about individual liberties and individual rights, we talk about people, persons, citizens. But in section 2, where we talk about the right to life, we say all human beings have a right to life. And then when you look at section 28, the healthcare amendment, it said right there for the people of Wyoming, subject to the reasonable regulation by your legislature. And yet the Supreme Court ignores that piece and says, we're gonna subject this to strict scrutiny. Not reasonable regulation by the legislature, but must be a compelling state interest. And if we have a compelling state interest, we must use the least restrictive means to enforce that. That's nowhere in section 28 of the Constitution. It's not there. What's there is reasonable regulation. But that just got ignored by the Supreme Court, and they focused in on the healthcare decision. So whether if you're talking about constitutional amendments, what do we put on the ballot? What's language? That's the problem with the ballot. What's the language? We can't say, here's a laundry list of 14 options that has something to do with abortion. You know, what percentage of the people of Wyoming go with which percentage? We have to put one set of language, one set of words. Is it an absolute ban? An absolute ban may not get the majority vote of the people of Wyoming. Is it heartbeat, 6 weeks, 12 weeks? Or do we authorize late-term abortions? Right? What language you're gonna put on that constitutional amendment, that's what matters. And that's why we have to be very cautious, not because it might not pass, but because the language that's chosen may not match up well to get the outcome that you're hoping for.
So just respectfully, just to be clear, so you would not put it on the
I
ballot?
would not put it on a ballot because you can't put a fair representation of the options to the people that reflect the options of the folks. Because there's a range of perspectives.
Thank you, Representative Washington. And Representative Green.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I agree with my good chairman of judiciary that life begins at conception and natural death is where life ends. And because of that, I would not put this on the ballot because it's already been on the ballot. And if you put the words abortion specifically on the ballot, how long is it until every piece of healthcare needs to then be on the ballot in our Constitution? And what do those regulations look like? Article 1, Section 38, particularly Section C, is the reasonable healthcare that the good chairman was speaking of. And in there it says that we are to, I wrote it down so I didn't get it wrong, to protect the health and general welfare of the people. Well, an abortion is the death of a person, and so by not voting to protect that child, I'm not upholding my constitutional duties. And in Section 2, where it speaks about all humans in Wyoming have a right to life. So I vote for the heartbeat bill and all pro-life legislation, and I believe that it's already been added to our Constitution, and that when we begin to add very specific procedures to the Constitution, we then set ourselves up for more regulations to come time and time and time again.
So it's a no to the ballot?
Correct.
Thank you. Committee-sponsored bills have been vetted and carefully crafted. Would you be in favor of granting preference on introduction of committee bills?
Well, we've got several chairmen up here. I don't mind jumping out first to say, absolutely. The taxpayers are investing a lot in the committee work of the legislature. And those bills, each one of them, you can put a price tag of about $5,000 on one of those bills that comes out of a committee and comes to a legislative session. And here lately, because of factions and infighting and whatever, we have taken to just throwing committee bills in the garbage. And they are the bills that are the best vetted, because we bring it out to the state of Wyoming and to the people and work with the people during committee meetings. And that's some of the best work we do. And I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame what we've done. favor, if I were in leadership, I would advocate for the fact that, otherwise do away with committee work. Because it costs us too much money, costs us too much time and too many tires on our trucks to get there, if we're just gonna throw the bills away, in favor of bills that come from somewhere else. So, absolutely, they should be, favored.
Representative Jarvis?
The only thing that I would add is provided that the committee is listening to the community.
Senator
As
Anderson?
another chairman, I think that's a good idea to have them have preference. But every one of those bills is not necessarily a good one. You get a committee that has too many people on it that are gonna sway it one way or the other. There can be committee bills that aren't particularly good either. But we got 17 times in the legislative process that we can kill that bill. But they should have a preference, because you had 10 to 12 people sit there for 6 days over the interim, looking at those bills and studying them. And that is a lot of input. The other night, we went till 8 o'clock on an issue that we should have been done about 4, but we tried to listen to the public for everything they had to say about an issue. So there's an awful lot of time spent by people and by legislators and by lobbyists and the citizens. Citizens are there presenting also. We had a room full, we just met, the Minerals Committee just met here in Casper. We had a room full both days of citizens, not just lobbyists. So there's a lot of input that we get and a lot of knowledge that we get that should be transmitted to the legislature quite easily. And they don't have any preference.
So that was an interim meeting, like working on these interim
Yes,
issues?
yes it was. Yes it was.
Representative Washington, thank you, Senator Anderson.
Yeah, I've come to the point, I didn't used to feel this way, but I've kind of come full circle that I think the 2/3 majority vote to introduce a bill during the budget session probably ought to just be done away with. And I would prefer controlling the number of non-budget bills simply by, how many days are available. So if we schedule 2 days for, second reading and second reading amendments, and 2 days for third reading and third reading amendments to the budget bill, that would shrink the number of days, especially if we did the entire day. Right, you start at 8 o'clock in the morning and go till 6 o'clock at night for budget bill. Then you're not having committee meetings those days, so you're gonna have less time to crank out bills that aren't the budget bill. So to throw in on top of that, the days you waste voting the 2/3 majority so that a minority of the body can kill your bill. And so depending upon how it falls, you know, like, 2 years ago, we had all these judiciary bills that have been worked through this interim. Day one of this session, the committee is a lot of brand new people who weren't on the committee during the interim, and they killed the bill. This year, we get a whole bunch of election reform bills. I think the majority of the body said, that's too many election bills, right? To crank out that many bills out of one committee all on one topic. Prioritize, consolidate, whatever, but we're not gonna deal with that many bills. And so a lot of those bills died, even though they'd gotten a lot of support from the committees. I just think maybe it's time to do away with that 2/3 and just devote a whole lot more time to the budget bill. And the time constraints themselves will fix the problem with all the other legislation during the budget session.
Thank you. This is another please all answer, so we'll start on this side and this way.
I like it.
How important is it that electeds running as Republicans adhere to the party platform?
I would say that, being a Republican and believing in the platform is probably key to the people that you represent, so they know how you'll vote.
Well, I think the problem is the level of generality that platforms tend to be written on, right? So you look at platform number 1 and it says life from conception to natural death. does that mean that Republicans oppose the death penalty? I think if you survey Republicans in Wyoming, you're not gonna find that a majority of the Republicans oppose the death penalty. Yet a platform that says conception to natural death seems like it says no death penalty. Okay? And then you look at another platform issue, and you have one that talks about private property rights and eminent domain and civil asset forfeiture from taking ill-gotten gains from drug dealers, right? Well, so if you support the platform with regards to eminent domain, but don't support the platform with regards to asset forfeiture, civil asset forfeiture, do you get credit for being 80% or not, right? Because part of the platform, you know, we put 4 or 5 different things in some of these platforms. And so you might be good on 2 or 3 of those. So how do you measure 80% compliance with the platform? And it's not uncommon to have platforms that conflict with each other. You can have a pro-life bill that stares down local control, right? So do you vote for the pro-life platform or do you vote for the local control platform? That's the problem you run with, and when you start trying to grade your Republicans based upon their compliance and fidelity to the platform. Generally speaking, I think most of us are probably 80%. You don't find 100% people when you walk door to door. You find 100% people at the caucus that develops the platforms, but most Republicans never go to the caucus. Caucus is where the hard charger true believers go, right? And so they crank out platforms that frankly, when you go door to door, there's not strong support for all of those platforms in an absolute fashion.
Thank you, Representative Washington. Representative Jarvis.
This one is peculiar, and it, like, there's a part of it where I just smile and shake my head because the way, like, when I look at just here recently, it's been like all over that I vote a specific way with another, and that my ratings aren't good because I get called all of these different things, and then I step back and I look at it, because then when you really dig through, because I deal in research and data, and I looked at somebody who had a 100% rating and I had a 0% rating, and we had one vote that was different. So I was like, well, wait, that narrative was really funny. Like when I did a side-by-side comparison of how that person voted and how I voted. And so I was like, you know, who's determining these? And then, you know, to speak to that on the why we vote a specific way, there's things that are in bills that shouldn't be in bills, that get hidden in bills that just make them really not Republican and not, you know, like we may have a Second Amendment bill that has a name and a title, and then it doesn't do what that title says it does, and then the narrative is you vote against the Second Amendment or you're not a specific way, when absolutely not. The what that bill does is actually devastating to a specific community or to a specific, like, we don't do that. And the Republicans that I know, we're hand up, not hand out. We take care of our neighbors. We don't try to see bad things happen to people. We pay our bills. So the platforms and how they get twisted in the narrative of what 80% is subject to determination, and it's interesting who's determining it.
Thank you, Representative Jarvis. Representative Campbell.
Oh my goodness, I don't know if I could add much more to that. The challenge I think that is for me, and this is just me personally speaking, because I do have people come after me, you know, about abiding by the platform. Yes, and I took an oath to uphold the Wyoming Constitution, and sometimes those are in conflict. And I was elected by 9,000 people, and I have a responsibility to them and their voice, which doesn't always align with every pillar of the platform. And there are pillars that conflict, and there are, so I wish it were that easy. Man, if I could just take a here's how I'm gonna vote every time, and 14 says I vote no, and 28 says I vote yes. I would have far less stress and more hair, I'm telling you. But because I take an oath to the Constitution, I owe a responsibility to those that elected me, and I am a Republican and have, these core values. I think we do the very best we can, and most of us, probably hit about 80%, but, yeah.
Representative Campbell, Senator Landon.
Yeah, I wanna commend everyone up here, great answers. I think ultimately it's up to the people in our districts to decide if we are Republican enough. I thought, Representative Washit brought up a really important point. There are dozens of bills every year that have conflicts in them related to our platforms, Republican platforms. I'm sure the other side finds the same thing. There are bills that are strong on one point, but they have a piece in them that you can't vote for because of a platform. So that's a tougher issue than people realize, and I think ultimately it's not up to some private club to decide who is Republican enough. It's up to the people, we the people. It's up to our people in the district to elect those that best represent them.
Thank you, Bill Landon. Senator
Yes,
Anderson.
yes. Over the last 60 years or so, I've been in the Republican Party. I've been committee chairman, party chairman, finance chairman, and I've been on the platform committee at the local level and at the state level many times. In fact, I chaired it many times. What I've seen since the 80s is that's a swing. There's a swing. It goes liberal, it goes conservative, it goes back and forth. All of that platform is a guideline for the legislators and for the Republicans. It is not a hard and fast rule. It's just like we've heard tonight, there's platforms that conflict with each other. So you've gotta take it by a grain of salt that some people got their platforms through and some people didn't. And some people got 2 or 3 platforms through. But the platform is not any law or any rules, it's just the platform of the party. And we've gotta look at it and say, okay, what did that little group that got together and caucused say? In my case, it was less than 20 people for the state platform, could influence that platform completely. They could decide what that was. And then all I had to do was take it to the state party convention and present it for them. And so that was not a very big group anytime. I was in another county and we had a real conservative group there. They got control one time, and the next time I went, the liberals came and they got control of that platform. So it went back and forth 2 or 3 times that I saw. And of course, right now, we're in a real conservative platform era, and we'll see the time when it goes liberal too. Thank you. Thank you for the red.
All right, thank you very much for that. There is a project, I'm talking about economic development, there's a project called the Seminole Pump Storage Project, and it's in the Wyoming Game and Fish's regulatory process, so before the Game and Fish Commission, but this is something that affects fish temperatures. It's an energy project. Is that a legislative process, or is that something that the legislature should have?
Let me go before he goes. I know.
Representative Washit.
Yeah, you just.
I don't think right now that it's a legislative topic, right?
It's just a large.
The proposals come forward, there's already regulatory processes at the county level, at the state level, that proposal's gonna have to go through. I think to have it thrown into the legislature at this juncture probably isn't the wisest approach. I think that the systems that are in place right now are adequate for the parties to be heard and for the concerns of people who might be adversely affected to have their voices and their issues brought forward. So I don't think there's gonna be a bill on it, I hope there's not gonna be a bill on it, but maybe Minerals is working on one.
So it's it's an interim topic,
It'll be in front of TRW in 2 weeks.
but
I
it's
don't
just,
know why
is
it
that just
should-
information?
I don't know why it should be.
Yeah,
It should
probably
be-
just information.
There's a mechanism in place to deal with it already.
Thank you, Representative Wash. Senator Anderson.
Yes, Dale.
Start the clock.
A year ago, we had that subject on our agenda for minerals. And what our issue was, we wanted to know how the thing worked, what it was and how it worked. And so that group came and talked to us about how they were gonna pump storage and then run it back through the generation and do all those kind of things. And we learned what we wanted to learn. Well, this year, at the management council, the, one committee was proposing that they would look at it, but they were looking at it from the fish and the mountain goats, the mountain sheep or whatever they are. And the management council was saying, oh, no, we've already studied that. And I had to get up and say, we did not study the fish and the sheep. We studied what the process was, and we think that the TRW ought to study what's gonna happen with the fish and the mountain goats. Well, in our last meeting here, it was allowed as how they ought to study it. And so now I'm hoping that they do study how it's gonna affect our fisheries and that herd of mountain goats that are down there, and see what we need to do about that. This is an interesting thing. I listed a whole bunch of things that we look like we're against business in Wyoming. We shut down your nuclear plant that was gonna be right out here and would be about 250 jobs. We've got people who are looking to shut this project down, and it's not that many jobs. It's a lot of construction jobs, but not that many permanent jobs. But everything we have that is bringing business to Wyoming, there's somebody objecting. We've got 2 deals down in Cheyenne right now, data center and a housing center that people are objecting to, that would be huge for our state to have these things happen. So we are not showing that we're pro-business in Wyoming.
Representative Green.
So when it comes to the Seminole Pump Project, where it's at in the federal permitting process, there's multiple comments. There's over 300 comments against it and only 1 for it. And I think that's really important to notice. The DEQ did issue their water permit because they checked all the boxes. However, I would argue that we don't have one oversight in Wyoming that looks at the project as a whole. Yes, we have the DEQ who's going to look at the impacts to the environment, but DEQ is not looking at the impacts that could potentially happen to tourism or to business when you're talking about outfitters, guides, drift boat fishermen, ice fishermen, what that air pocket means, water. The water quality then coming down for our drinking water is a real concern, so DEQ would be involved there too. But there's no one agency in the state of Wyoming that looks at these industrial projects as a whole. The Department of Revenue looks at their section, DEQ looks at their section, industrial siding looks at their piece, the municipalities look at their piece. But I do think that there's an opportunity here for us to review statute and find somewhere that could review the project as a whole. And so that's something that I'm currently looking into. I don't have a solution for it. I don't have all the answers for this particular project, but I do recognize that something like the Casper-Alcova Irrigation District stands to make some money from it because they would sell water to this particular project. Is that good for Wyoming? They need to repair their industry, and their ratepayers wouldn't have to pay for it at that point, so that could be good for the agricultural folks. But what does this mean for the fishermen, the drinking water, the sheep, the outfitters, the guides? What does it mean for tourism in Carbon and Natrona counties, not just Carbon County? Those are things that we have to take into account.
I have one more thing. Can you imagine if you were a business and you wanted to open some project and they said, well, we don't have an agency to go through. You have to take that through the legislature. And the legislature's gonna look at every facet of this project, top to bottom, and the legislature will ultimately decide on your project.
We're going to Tennessee.
Yeah, let's go to Tennessee.
It's on your
Exactly.
interim list.
Talk
Yeah.
about a chilling effect on
That's
business.
exactly what they said.
Whoa.
We're going to Tennessee.
Along that same line then, oh, go ahead, Senator Lynn.
No, I wanna hear from you. That'd be great.
Along that same line then, the Prometheus project that is proposed for the Falls Ranch, just, east of Casper, is a 500,000 square foot data center. Generating their own power and whatnot. Do you all have opinions on this, and is it something you would support?
Well, Dale, let me jump in as the chairman of Travel and Wildlife. That is one of our interim topics. And, to Representative Lean, I'd say you're very welcome to come and find out, answers to some of the questions you've got. That's the idea, here in 2 weeks in Casper. Travel and Wildlife will be meeting. I spent about an hour on the phone with a gentleman from Utah who's heading up a lot of their information and legal work. I think it'll be informative. That's the idea, for our committee is to be as up to speed and know as much about this project as we can. Our interest, of course, is on the tourism front and, those who make a living out on the Platte River. Also a big concern for the game and fish, with regard to that sheep herd that Senator Anderson alluded to. Lots of other issues related to Seminole and the pumping of that water, what it might do downstream. So that's one of the topics on, one of the agenda topics, and we look forward to that. We're gonna try to learn all we can about it. I do share Senator Anderson's concern, everyone. I think we've entered a time where all of a sudden we've got leadership that's throwing rocks at new development and new business. I'm very concerned as chairman of our school facilities committee. Out across our state, we have school districts out there that are losing numbers dramatically. There were only 4 districts out of 48 the last 5 years that have gained any population in their school districts. Our small towns are in trouble. We're gonna be looking at school buildings, one of which up in Weston County is 30% occupancy now. So what do we as a legislature do with that building that is 30% occupied? We need to think about some of these things. What if we just dry up business? We're gonna be drying up our small towns, and so very concerned. Thank you.
Thank you for
Appreciate
that. So back to the topic on the, that was on the stored energy. What about the data center? Representative.
So one thing, I did have an opportunity to meet with them, and it is unique, with their closed loop system. So there is initial water draw, but then it's just recycled internally, which is a huge benefit. And I think part of what, to kind of speak to what our senators were saying, we tend to have a gut no reaction to things, instead of saying, okay, if this is gonna happen, how do we do it right? How do we make sure, we take care of the wildlife and the impacts to wildlife? And I mean, one of the questions was asked when we were talking to Prometheus was, is it gonna be like this hum? These big data centers, and you have this just underlying hum all of the time, and what's that gonna do to the wildlife? And what's that gonna do to the birds? And what's it gonna do? And so we had those conversations. But it's thinking about, in order to bring new industry in order to bring new opportunities in, how do we do it right and take care of our resources at the same time? How do we say yes and, which is I think the direction we're moving in, instead of just flat out saying no. The other challenge we have though is we have folks speaking against a lot of these projects, and then we remind them that it is on private property. And they want the government to step in and tell people what they can and cannot do on their private property, which then also becomes an issue.
Wait, isn't that a platform?
I know, it's like, if we gotta let them do it, you can put up as many wind turbines as you want, because it's your private property. So that becomes part of it. So it's how do we do this in a way that makes sense and does right by all of the stakeholders?
And
Representative
Yeah.
Jarvis.
I think that speaks volumes why we have so many different groups that come in and look at things, and why one big group that makes that decision isn't always the best idea, because with those groups comes a level of expertise in that specific area. So when you have people coming in to look at what is the impact on the land, what is the impact on the air, what is the impact in all of these different areas, when you combine them, I can tell you, being a citizen legislator and being thrown into the position, I thought I knew a lot about Wyoming. I'm born and raised here, grew up on a farm, and I found out in less than a week how little I know about things, and were making very big decisions without the level of knowledge that I really needed to be able to make those in the beginning. Hence the reason that you find these expert groups and that you really rely on them. And you rely on the community to come tell you their perspective and how they impact it. And so do I support it? I don't know yet, truthfully, because we're in the information gaining, and I'll be curious to hear what everybody brings to the table. Because I wanna hear from the groups of does the hum in fact, what does it do? What does this do? What are our pros and our cons? Because there's one thing I found about legislation, there is no black and white. It gets very, very gray, very, very fast, and and when you're making some pretty big decisions, it's how do I sleep at night when I know that it was the absolute best decision with all of the information that I was able to collect from all the different people and all the different, experts, it matters.
So,
Yeah, Art, I think Art's got one too.
Art, you go first, go ahead.
So, when I think about the executive branch and the resources that they have and the staff and so forth, that they can bring to bear on looking at a project like data centers or pump storage or whatever. And then I look at the Art Washit legislative office, right? There's my immense staff of resources. I hope we don't get to the point where the legislature is deciding every one of these big projects. All in favor of data center in Converse County, say aye. All in favor of data center in Cheyenne, say aye. Might be a great way for legislators to try to gain campaign contributions, but I think it's a horrible way to make policy. I think we make the general policies and we say, all right, game and fish, you assess sheep herds, you assess fishing. DEQ, you take care of water quality, you take care of, and then that's their job. And if we've not done a good job in terms of creating a system within the executive branch to deal with these industrial siting projects, then we need to fix the system. It shouldn't come down to us as a legislature voting thumbs up or thumbs down on each of these individual industrial projects. That would be a horrible idea.
Thank you, Representative Washington. Representative Landon, Senator Landon.
Well, just to, not to beat this horse too long, but I think the chairman of corporations had it right. I read yesterday some comments from Senator Case, who is the Senate chairman of corporations, which I serve on that committee as well. And we will be looking at all the grid issues. And he said regarding data centers, he said, I just want to know what's in it for Wyoming. And I thought, you know what? That's a great comment. What's in it for Wyoming? And that's really our job, is to take a look at these and just make sure that Wyoming's getting out of it what it needs to get out of it. We should do that for gambling. Anyway, I do think that I'm going to be interested down at Seminole, for example. 2 years ago, the Western Power Grid, the demand outstripped supply. So we are no longer in the Western United States producing enough electricity for all of our demands. That's something to think about tonight as we go forward. So a power project like that again, my question's gonna be, well, okay, well, what's in it for Wyoming? Can we do it right, like the representative pointed out? Let's make sure that we can do this thing right, and it's not gonna impact the people we talked about. But what's in it for Wyoming? And if we're just producing power for the open market, then we need to make sure that Wyoming is compensated appropriately. And I think that the Corporations Committee will be doing that. I think the Travel and Wildlife Committee is going to be looking into that. And I fully agree with Representative Washit. Our executive branch is second to none. They're top notch. So I'm sure they're doing their work. Thank you.
Senator Anderson.
You asked about Prometheus, what we thought of Prometheus and whether we're supporting it. On the Minerals Committee, we heard about Prometheus about 2 years ago when it was still just a thought in two guys' head. And two of the things that they brought up were that they were gonna recycle water, so there would not be a drag on our water system. And two, they brought up what the taxes would be for Converse and Natrona County, since they sit on the county line. And it's a big deal for both those counties. We talk about what the state's gonna get out of this. State isn't gonna get too much out of it, but the counties are gonna get quite a bit out of it in those two areas. So I fully support it. It's on private land, they're privately funded, they're producing their own power. Yes, that's the kind of projects that we need to bring to Wyoming.
Well, I want to personally, and on behalf of the League of Independent Voters in the library, thank you for being here tonight. It's great to see you and for your thoughtful answers. These were good questions. I'm not sure.
Thank you for the questions.
You know, and want to thank you for being here. Want to thank the audience for being here. And so to close, I mean, I think we have about 10 minutes left, so that's roughly a little more than a minute apiece. I wonder if you would talk a little bit about what you see for the future, what your hopes are, what you would like people that you represent in Natrona County to know about what you think about the coming year, your future, our future.
That'll be easy for you.
He's gonna retire.
But you know, that said, I mean, you have an immense amount of experience and a perspective that you can probably offer something for the future generations of legislators and voters to think about.
You know, I could ask, thank you, Dale, and I would just say, one of the toughest decisions I ever had to make was whether or not I would offer to serve for 4 more years. 20 years is a long time, and I just thought it was time for me to tip my Stetson and ride out of the arena and go ride the open range a little bit. I owe some time back to my family. But, you know, I get asked a lot about, in August, how do I know who to vote for? And I would just encourage everyone to get a set of questions put together. Questions like, have you ever donated to a nonprofit? Have you ever served on a local board? Have you ever gone to a Natrona County Mustang football game? Do you know where Farson is?
Have you stopped for ice cream?
Do you see what I mean? I mean, honestly, find out about who these people are. Do they really represent who you are? And I always tried to work very, very hard to do that. And I hope that I succeeded in some way of representing you. That's what you need to do in August, is to make sure that these people who are offering to do this job, they need to pass inspection. And I encourage you, ask them those kind of questions about where we live. Yeah. Start to you, Jim.
Senator Anderson.
The big thing for the future is the funding for the state of Wyoming. Oil and gas and coal have been very good to us, and the legislature was smart enough to put away the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, of which we have over 10 billion in there now, and we're shooting for 18 billion, I think is what Harshman has said.
Yeah,
18
They
18
have
by
an
30,
18 button.
by 30.
Then they have an 18 button now.
Yeah.
That will take the place of a lot of that revenue that we're gonna lose, for the state of Wyoming. But for the local agencies, this 50% reduction is gonna be huge. And you ask what we can do about that, well, it's called backfill, and the state of Wyoming backfills those agencies to make them whole. And then that's more money from the state of Wyoming also to support our local agencies. So the big funding problems of the future, I hope we don't see them. I hope we continue to have $100 barrel oil. Our natural gas price is hurting us a little bit right now. It's only about $2.86, and we need it to be quite a bit higher. Coal is looking good, and we heard some encouraging statements about coal exports out of the US on the West Coast. We got 3 different places that we could be exporting some coal with this administration. And of course, that changes in a couple of years, so we gotta be careful, but maybe we could be exporting more coal in the near term also. So lots of opportunities for income.
Thank you, Senator Anderson.
Thank you.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you for doing this and for being here tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you. I think what I'm really encouraged by is the amount of engagement and participation we're seeing. It's kind of like Wyoming residents are now waking up and going, wait, what? I should have been paying attention. So we have a lot more engagement, which is really good. A lot more people paying attention and asking questions, which is really good. We need more of that. And I think we complain about things all the time. We complain about, the exodus of youth has been a problem since I was in high school, and that was a really long time ago. And we complain about healthcare, and we complain about the lack of jobs, and we complain about, but we haven't decided what we want Wyoming to look like. What do we want it to look like 5 years from now? What do we want it to look like 20 years from now? Then how do we put the people in place to move the needle, right? And get us there. It's gonna take all of us paying attention, being involved, asking the questions, running for office, serving to actually move the needle, but we get to decide. What do we want Wyoming to look like?
Thank you, Representative Kim. Representative Jarvis.
I could talk for hours. If you live in my district, take my survey. There's a new one coming out for this next session. But I think I would mirror like because a lot of the questions that I get as I would agree people are starting to become a lot more aware and ask questions, and people they're fearful of I don't know the person, or I don't know who I'm voting for, and the idea of ask those questions, I love it, because truly this is where I was born, this is where I've lived my life, and I hope that my children and my children's children want to be here as well. And part of that is helping balance that, making it a place that people want to be. Because yes, in education we are seeing decline in enrollment, but my other half runs an entire business solely by himself because he can't find the employees to help. So as a power sports, he's mechanicking, he's scheduling, he's running, he's bookkeeping, he's a little bit of everything. And so watching that and watching we're not producing the kids that are filling the trades that we have. And so how do we, yes, we have to build these industries, but we also have to fill the needs that we have right now within our communities. And did I get the red? The red dot.
Representative
Can
Washington.
I steal a couple of your minutes?
Sure. Some kind of.
Can you donate?
Just borrow 30 seconds.
You know, I tend to be the Debbie Downer, I guess, in these kinds of discussions, because Wyoming, like most other states, is heavily dependent upon the federal government for funding healthcare, for funding all sorts of things. We get federal grants for Department of Corrections, we get federal grants for Department of, the Attorney General's office, we get federal grants for all sorts of things. Local governments get federal grants, but our federal government's 39 trillion in debt, crushing down on 40 trillion. We can't even wrap our heads around what $40 trillion in national debt does to our national economy. And the day is soon coming that when there's a major forest fire, the federal government's not sending us a check. And when we have a dam that ages out and starts collapsing, we have to replace it, the federal government can't send us a check. We're facing that day. We're an economic cliff with our national government. Wyoming has done a great job. We're the envy of most other states in terms of having a balanced budget, billions in reserves. But when the day comes where Uncle Sam quits sending checks to the state of Wyoming for all these many things, then we have to really prioritize what's really important to the people of Wyoming. What are we willing to pay for out of our state budget? Tough days ahead.
I'd say thank you, but, thank you.
I felt pretty good after that.
Debbie Downer.
Close to reality.
Thank you, and thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for the questions. When I look at Wyoming, I'm looking at the infrastructure. Without proper water and roads in place, we can't build our economy, and we have to make sure that those are successful first as we're bringing in those economy to build our jobs. We have to make sure that education is sustaining to our children, and that the education that we're giving them will sustain them for a lifetime, and not just for the 12 years that they're in K through 12. Looking forward into Wyoming, I agree with Representative Washit that there's some tough days coming, and it comes down to prioritizing. But we can start right now with prioritizing. We don't have to wait until the rainy day comes. And I think that that is a little bit of sunshine for us. And so that we can look forward and say, as you're moving into these elections, we want you to go and visit with the candidates, visit with your city council members, visit with potential city council members, visit with anybody that is running for public office that is a ballot that you can cast. Make sure that you understand who they are, who they represent, and the way that they will vote. I think that that's really key. Understanding that they're willing to listen to the people, because the people are the government, and we need to make sure that the people are being represented by the folks that they deem necessary.
Thank you all once again, and thank you all once again.
Thanks, everybody.
All 10 of you.
You're gonna drive them out?
I gotta come early tomorrow morning.